Hello everyone, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to be talking about one of the most controversial streamers on Kick right now, which is Vicular. And I have to say, this guy's gaining a lot of traction, getting attacked from left, right, from all directions, and I'll definitely get into why that is. And also, I don't want to be doing what everyone else is doing on the internet when they're covering Vicular, which is judging him, calling him immoral, calling him a degenerate. That's not something I want to do here. I want to be objective. I want to have a more pragmatic approach in this video. And I want to focus on what he represents. Because in my opinion, Clavicular isn't the problem. He's a reflection of the environment we're living in today. And if you really want to understand why people like him exist, you have to look at the culture that created him. So that brings me into the interview that I want to react to, which is a Channel 5 interview with Clavicular. I'm going to give you my initial thoughts on his philosophy and lifestyle, and let's get into it.
How you doing, man? Getting started. How are you?
I'm good. So for those who don't know, can you tell us your name and kind of what you do?
I'm Clavicular. I do live streaming. I hop on a variety of podcasts to talk about sort of my philosophy on why looks are arguably one of the most important things in terms of your success in life.
Mm-hmm. And what do you mean by that?
Well, what I basically mean is every single trait of yours is going to be perceived differently according to your looks level, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're super caged in and shy, but you're good looking, that will be perceived a lot different rather than if you were, you know, an acne-ridden, balding jester and you stay inside all day. People will call you a recluse, they'll call you weird, whatever. Mm-hmm. So even though the actions are the complete same. So that's what I'm talking about here.
And what's the exact equation for measuring like aesthetic value?
So there's a lot of different ratios that go into it to calculate someone's overall facial harmony score. So for example, that could be the width of your eyes relative to the width of your cheekbones, would be your eye separation ratio, or your mid-face ratio, for example. And then you're going to take all these measurements and calculate them into a final percentage harmony score.
And who has the highest score right now living?
I believe it's Matt Bomer.
What in particular about Matt's face gives him that high score?
It's not one particular thing because it's a calculation of a lot of different measurements.
Well, congrats on the big viewership and stuff like that.
Thank you.
It's kind of cool to see.
I'm going to pause the video there. So basically, let's talk about his philosophy here, right? And he was mentioning facial harmony, right? And he was mentioning a celebrity that had the best one. So pretty much just talking about facial measurements and how that plays a factor into your, you know, your beauty, right, to your appearance and how good looking you are. So I can see why that stirs up a lot of controversy for sure. So but let's kind of like simplify this a bit, right? So let's talk about the looksmaxing philosophy, right? So because this is a big part of his content, right? His content revolves around looksmaxing. And what is looksmaxing? I guess in simple terms, it's basically just optimizing your appearance at the highest level possible. That's really what it is. Even if it causes, I guess, some form of health complication, right? That's if you're taking it to the extreme. But I understand it because in today's world, that actually makes sense because we do live in a visual first culture. You know, we have Instagram, we have TikTok, we have streaming, you know, we have social media. We're living in the digital age. We're living in a attention economy. So your appearance is your brand. So for someone like him, improving on his looks isn't just personal, it's also strategic. So I understand where he's coming from here. So even if he is taking it to the extreme, and I can also understand why some people might say, hey, this might be bad influence on the youth. And that's a valid argument. So let's continue on with the video here.
It just seemed like when I first started lifting and then I got really into, you know, pharmacology and steroid usage, I was like, this is like literally a video game cheat code is what it almost feels like. And it seemed like so ridiculous to try to play the game fair when I had access to all these things.
What was the first kind of thing that you tried out? Was
Test.
Test. How do you get that stuff?
No comment.
But it's like, it's technically illegal in the US, right? But other countries have like more lax regulations.
No, it's prescription only.
Okay. And how did that affect your like looks immediately? Like when you mix that with a bit of lifting?
I started to blow up quite quickly in terms of the amount of muscle mass I had, but I descended because I was lifting in a huge caloric surplus. So I turned into kind of like a blob sack. So, I mean, I definitely looks minned from taking tests and just bulking, but it wasn't the test. It was just like prioritizing physique and mass over leanness and angularity.
And you were already creating content like right off the bat when you found.
I'm going to pause it here. So, okay. So what I got from this is that it seems like he became obsessed with pharmacology once he jumped on tests and anabolic steroids and he started lifting seriously, right? So he started to see how the anabolic steroids and the lifting was changing his body composition, right? So, and he is fairly educated on pharmacology. I did watch some videos of him talking about different pharmaceutical drugs. And so he definitely does his due diligence. So I give him that. I give credit where it's due. So I can see why he's definitely getting into a lot of trouble because he's being very transparent on the drug usage that he's utilizing to improve on his appearance. Well, okay. To play a little devil's advocate here, I don't think he's doing anything different from anyone else, right? Because we live in a culture where a lot of people are consuming any type of pharmaceutical drug to enhance their appearance. And I'll give you an example. The other day, I was watching a quick clip from SNL from Saturday Night Live, and they had a bit where they were mocking Looksmaxxing. They didn't mention Clavicular's name, but they were mocking Looksmaxxing, right? They were mocking it, and they were mocking it, making fun of it, right, belittling it. And I didn't find it funny. I didn't find the bit funny at all. I don't even find SNL funny these days, but that's a whole different discussion of itself. And the reason why I didn't find it funny was because the jokes weren't that clever. And then also, I find it ironic that a late night show that's affiliated with the entertainment industry is mocking a young streamer that is trying to improve on his appearance. The entertainment industry is guilty of looksmaxing. The entertainment industry is constantly abusing plastic surgery and cosmetic procedures and pharmaceutical drugs. So they don't tell you these things because they don't want to look bad, and also because their brand is their appearance, right? The entertainment industry abuses everything they can in order to enhance their looks. That's just a given. I'm sure everyone knows this by now. So, you name it. I mean, from BBLs, from breast implants, from double jaw surgery, from facelifts, from Botox, from lip fillers and hair implants, right? They did it all, man. That's the entertainment industry is guilty of looksmaxing. So to criticize this young man for doing the same thing you're doing, that's a bit hypocritical, right? So that's what I don't like here, right? I don't like a lot of these grandstanding individuals, right? Trying to belittle this young streamer. He's just playing the same game you are. That's all. That's really what it is. And he's being transparent on what he's doing. Now, I can understand that this can have a bad influence on the youth, and the youth are going to have the incentive to jump on these drugs and not have a clear understanding of it because it does have adverse effects. So, so I do understand that, right? That is a valid argument. But the reality is that your favorite celebrity, your favorite athlete, your favorite fitness influencer is on some sort of pharmaceutical drug in order to enhance their appearance. So basically, they're looksmaxing. So it's really that simple, right? It's not rocket science. So I understand where he's coming from. So, listen, this guy's not a role model. He's not a role model, right? He's just being pragmatic with things, right? So he's just understanding the world that he's living in. He's understanding the environment that he's living in. And he's just trying to be objective and say, hey, this is what's going to improve my looks. This is what's going to improve my life. This is how I'm going to be able to monetize my beauty by taking these type of drugs. it is what it is, right? So, I mean, if you listen to what he said, also which caught my attention is that jumping on these anabolic steroids was like a cheat code, right? So, and he's saying, why do I need to play by the same rules like everyone else? Like I'd rather just jump on these drugs because I do see an improvement on my appearance. So yeah, I totally understand. I totally understand. There's a saying that always stuck with me, which was rules are for people who can't think for themselves. So, so I understand why this young streamer is the way he is. So, all right, so let's go on to the final clip where he's talking about, modern dating and relationships. So I think it was probably the best discussion out of this interview. So let's take a look at that.
Giving any reason on why the promiscuity is bad, then you're just like a jester. It doesn't mean anything.
So do you think males lose pair bonding value in the same way that women do as they get
No,
increased?
it's a little bit different.
How come you think?
Well, just the way that our brain chemistries are different, right? So, and it's also not necessarily a bad thing, because it's like we're talking about before, the ability to put your foot down and leave bad situations. Because the framing in a relationship has, for centuries, throughout the entire existence of organized societies, has been in the favor of men, right? It's been male-dominated societies. That's sort of what needs to be restored.
Don't you think you maybe want a more experienced partner so that that person has better understanding of human intimacy?
No, because that's not what sex is intended for, right? Yeah, like it's enjoyable to have sex with women, but that's not the intention behind it, and that was never meant to be. This is like a very new thing in the context of history. People just have regular sex with random people for pure pleasure and then never talk to them again.
But weren't the ancient Romans on some like gay orgy vibes? And like samurais were on some gay shit?
First of all, it's not even the Romans necessarily, it's more so the army, but like what's the relevance of that?
But you're talking about the people having sex for pleasure as a new thing and that beforehand it was not used for that purpose.
I said generally.
Generally, got you.
But yeah, in terms of relationship, just because like Roman soldiers who hadn't seen their wives and have no ability to see their wives were homosexual, that doesn't, change what I'm saying.
But it was outliers back then.
Yeah, it almost is like the same context as people in prison who are not able to have sex with their wife.
So back to what you were saying, which I think is super interesting. You're saying you feel like nowadays the relationship and human intimacy and sex has changed.
Yeah, it has changed.
And in the sense that before it was more just about procreation?
Yeah, more about intimacy, procreation, bonding with your partner, and now that really doesn't exist.
And what do you think, I guess, hypersexualized our society?
The sexual revolution, clubbing culture, just it being normalized, contraceptives, all that kind of stuff.
So relatively new stuff. Like you're talking pretty much since like the mid 1900s.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And what do you think was the greater agenda at play there? Do you think it was just people losing their family values, or?
I don't really think that matters. The greater agenda at play, like that's just going to be a lot of like conspiratorial talk. It doesn't matter.
I more mean like just after World War II ends, like the hippie movement starts and you have this sort of like you said, sexual revolution, people expressing themselves in new ways and kind of just like subcultures emerging. Like the divorce rate went up after that and all that stuff in the past 70 years.
Well, yeah, and that's like people moving away from religion, like the Catholic Church doesn't allow divorce, or at least it's not supposed to. There's a variety of factors why people chose to sort of have this rebellion against traditionalism, and it happened, so it is what it is.
And you think that it was ultimately a bad thing to turn away from the church?
Yeah, I would say so.
How come?
Well, I think that there's a lot of benefit to having some sort of like structure in play in a society, but I think I am not the most well-educated theologian, so yeah. I don't really talk about theological issues. It's not that I'm like anti-religion, it's just I don't really like to talk on any issues I don't have too much authority on. So I really haven't like thought about it too much or done any research.
You just mentioned the Catholic Church specifically. I was just wondering.
I'm going to pause it there. So definitely one of my favorite discussion out of the interview. So what he's saying is not wrong, right? We live in a society where both men and women are more. We live in a society where both men and women have more freedom than ever before, and people can choose how they date, who they date, and how they live. So there's less pressure to follow traditional paths like settling down early. So that is the reality of it, right? It's 2026, 1956, right? So in 1956, it was a more traditional structure, right? More traditional values. People went to church more often. People married young, right? So we don't live in that type of society anymore, right? So we don't emphasize those traditional norms and values. Well, depending where you live in the country, but as a whole, we just don't emphasize that anymore. And when you pay attention to Hollywood movies, pay attention to music, just pop culture in general, right? Just we don't live in that type of society anymore. So I completely understand where he's coming from. So it's like what I said. So Clavicular is not the problem. He's just a reflection of the environment that we currently live in. That's it. That's really what it is. The more I look into this guy, I understand exactly how he thinks. Definitely some of the things he says is questionable, like the bone smashing and things like that. But once again, it's he's just trying to improve on his looks on in every possible way, even if it's taking it to the extreme. So it is what it is. You're gonna have people like that. So there are some definitely questionable things that he says, sort of like pseudoscience things that he mentions. So yeah, for sure. And he's definitely not a role model, right? But who is these days, right? So yeah, he's definitely an interesting streamer for sure. Um, and he's very educated on pharmacology. So I give him that. I give credit where it's due. So I did watch some videos of him discussing on different pharmaceutical drugs. So he definitely does his research. So I'll definitely give him that. Um, anyway, I don't want to keep this video too long, but I'll definitely like to make more videos on him. I think this interview was pretty good. So yeah, I guess to end this video, I did notice one thing I'll mention here before I end the video is that a lot of people were attacking him because he was, messing around with different girls that had boyfriends, and um, they didn't like that. They're like, "Oh, what's this guy doing?" Et cetera, et cetera. So, like, they were saying that he's this degenerate. So, and I can understand that. I can understand that. It's a valid argument. Once again, he's not a role model, right? So, he's a promiscuous guy, and the girls he hangs out with are also promiscuous as well. So it is what it is, right? And he lives in Miami. And he's part of that whole Miami culture. He's always in the nightclubs. He's constantly messing around with tourists or OnlyFans girls, right? He's in the nature. He's in the that's just the current, that is the culture of Miami nightlife. That's just the way it is, right? So um and that's the lifestyle he lives. So, and that's what he chooses. So he has that agency as an adult. So it is what it is. I don't know what to say. So, we can sit here and criticize him, but he's an adult. He can make his own decisions, and that's the current culture we live in, right? We have agency now, so we can choose. We can choose who we want to date, how we date, et cetera, right? I already said it, so I'm rambling here for too long. But I did want to say that I noticed, especially on YouTube, there was this constant need for people to grandstand when they were talking about Clavicular. They were trying to act like they were morally superior compared to this guy. They were like acting like they were above his behavior that they were criticizing, and that's fine. I get it. If you don't like it, that's okay. No, no, I'm not shaming those people. I completely understand, especially if you're a traditional person, especially if you're a parent, if you have kids. I understand. But I guess the point I'm trying to make here is that in reality, we're all human. We're all flawed. We're all inconsistent. None of us live up to our own moral standards all the time. That's a fact. So it doesn't make us evil. It just makes us human. We make mistakes, and we act in our own self-interest. We try to survive, to get ahead, and to look out for ourselves. That's just human nature. That is just human nature. That was the point I was trying to make in this video. That was the point. That's really it. So so instead of pretending that we're above it, maybe more honest to acknowledge that we're operating within it. So anyway, sorry. I'm going to end the video. This video is way too long. So if you liked it or disliked it, let me know. If you have any critiques, let me know. But definitely I did like making this video. It was very interesting for sure. So I'll definitely see you on the next one, and always remember to question things. Take care.